Hey guys, tonight we begin at the edge of a riverbank, just as the sky turns from deep indigo to that uncertain gray that teases you about whether it's dawn or just your imagination. You hear the low rush of water against polished stones, the pop of an occasional fish breaking the surface, and the slow breath of mist lifting away like a reluctant blanket. You stand there barefoot, toes sinking into mud that feels equal parts squishy and freezing, and you're probably thinking you wouldn't survive 10 minutes without Wi Fi or coffee. That's fair. But tonight, your job is simpler, just to watch, to listen, and to let yourself drift along as we step into the hidden survival skills of Native Americans, starting where life begins, the river. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you dropped your location and local time in the comments. Something about seeing where everyone is listening from makes these late night rambles feel like a shared campfire. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The hunters are already awake. You see them lean against long spears, not because they're lazy, but because they know patience is part of breakfast. A ripple at the far bend tells them more than a weather app ever could. One man, his braids tied close to his head, squints at the water's edge. He sees the way reeds bend in one direction. He'll later tell you that means a fish school just passed through. You, on the other hand, would have just thought the wind got pushy. There's a reason the river was called the first pantry. Mainstream history tells you native peoples across North America relied heavily on rivers for food, transport, and even spiritual guidance. Fish were protein, sure, but they were also prophecy. In some traditions, the very act of watching water was considered a form of prayer. Now, quirky tidbit, there are records of people fashioning hooks not just from carved bone or antler, but sometimes from the claws of birds. Imagine tying a line to a talon and thinking, yep, this will totally catch dinner. And, apparently, it worked. Historians still argue whether those early fish weirs, the wooden lattices jammed into streams, were primarily communal tools or spiritual offerings. You stand by one now, seeing branches woven at angles that make it impossible for fish to pass upstream. Every slippery body gets funneled into a waiting basket, efficient, elegant, and you can't help but think this is nature's version of a vending machine, except no coins, no buttons, and a lot more patience. Your stomach growls. Modern reflex. Out here, breakfast isn't poured from a box. A young hunter presses a finger to his lips, and you follow his gaze. A heron freezes mid-step, neck cocked toward the water. He whispers, not with words, but with the simple raise of an eyebrow, that you should pay attention. The heron's about to strike, and if the bird knows where the fish are, so do you. It hits you then. Survival is often about outsourcing your work to someone with better instincts. Think of it as the prehistoric version of Googling. You kneel closer, inhaling the earthy damp. The river smells alive. Mud, moss, the faint metallic tang of fish scales. You dip your hand, and coldness shoots through your bones. You imagine drinking it, though part of you worries about parasites, and you remember those documentaries that scared you about amoebas. But they didn't have bottled water, so survival meant knowing where the current filtered cleanest. Moving water, bubbling and noisy, was safer than stagnant pools. That was knowledge whispered across generations. If the river sings, you can sip. One elder, face lined like folded bark, shows you a pouch filled with powdered cattail root. Stirred into water, it thickens into something like porridge. He grins at your doubtful expression. Yes, it's mushy. Yes, it tastes like damp cardboard. But it fills your belly. You'd call it gluten-free organic. He calls it Tuesday. Across the bank, a boy squats with a stick. He drags it through wet clay, drawing what looks like wavy lines. You realize he's tracking the river's mood. Every bend, every curve is memorized. Because if the current rises too high, the village must move. You think about your own life. Google Maps reroutes you when traffic's heavy. Here, cartography is a game of doodles and memory. Honestly, it feels more reliable. The sun climbs, and the hunters spear a shimmering trout. They whoop softly, as if the sound might ripple back and scare the others away. A scale flicks off, sticking to your arm, tiny, iridescent, a reminder that survival is sometimes beautiful. You try to imagine your breakfast burrito glittering. It just doesn't compare. One man kneels, thanks the fish in a whisper. You watch him place a pinch of tobacco into the river as offering. Fact check. Many tribes performed rituals of gratitude before and after hunting or fishing. The quirky side note? Some believed failing to do so would offend river spirits, leading to mysteriously empty nets. You smile. Spiritual insurance policies existed long before modern ones, and probably with fewer forms to fill out. You lean back on your elbows, soaking in the warmth. Your eyelids feel heavy, lulled by the steady gurgle. The hunters clean the fish with practiced flicks. The smell of raw flesh is sharp, but soon replaced by the richer aroma of roasting meat. They skewer trout over embers, skin crackling, fat dripping into the fire with tiny hisses. Your mouth waters, though you remind yourself you're just visiting, floating in story. The food's for them, not for you. A girl no older than 12 tosses handfuls of herbs over the fire. The smoke rises fragrant, warding off flies and spirits alike. She waves the smoke toward her face, eyes half closed. You copy her, feeling silly but oddly peaceful. The smoke clings to your hair, earthy and soothing. It's not perfume, but it lingers with a memory you won't shake. The first bite of fish is passed to the elder. He chews slowly, nods approval, then hands strips around. Each person tears a piece, no one hoards. You remember awkward office pizza nights, where someone always grabs 4 slices. Out here, survival makes sharing non-negotiable. You take a bite, it's smoky, delicate, and you imagine yourself chewing in rhythm with centuries of ancestors. Another fact slips in. Native peoples didn't just eat the fish. Bones were ground into tools, skins turned into thread, nothing wasted. That quirky tidbit again. They sometimes made jewelry from the scales. You hold up the one still stuck to your arm and think, bracelet, necklace, or just body glitter for cavemen. Whatever works. As the sun crests higher, the river shifts color from silver to gold. Shadows shorten. The hunters gather nets to dry, lines coiled neatly. No tangles allowed. Tangles meant hunger tomorrow. You yawn, not from boredom, but from the rhythm of it all. The river hums like a lullaby. You imagine drifting downstream, eyes closed, rocked by currents that carried both food and story. Historians still argue whether rivers were seen more as boundaries or lifelines. You know the truth lies in both. They separated tribes, yes, but they also connected them. You picture rafts floating down, carrying corn, obsidian, gossip. The water wasn't just survival, it was social media, just wetter. By now, your skin smells like smoke, your stomach hums with imaginary fish, and your eyes feel heavy. You realize dawn by the riverbank isn't just about survival, it's about rhythm, about waking with the water, eating with the mist, and resting with the flow. Tomorrow it starts again. No alarms, no snooze button, just the eternal whisper of a river telling you when to rise, when to hunt, when to sleep. The fish is long gone from your mouth, but the taste lingers like a ghost, smoky and faintly sweet. You step away from the riverbank, belly warm, and the hunters gesture for you to follow. The forest swallows you almost immediately. Trees rise so tall, you have to crane your neck until it hurts. The canopy locks the sky away, and for a second, you panic. What if you get lost? But then you realize, for them, this is home, not labyrinth. They read bark, the way you scroll text messages. You trudge on soft soil, leaves crunching beneath your feet. But every time you think you're making noise, one of them gives you a look like, seriously, do you want the deer to hear us in Michigan? You try to lighten your step, imagining yourself as a ninja, but it comes off more like a toddler sneaking cookies. They smile anyway. Survival, it turns out, doesn't mind a little comedy. The trail seems invisible to you, but one man taps the ground with a stick, points at the faintest impression. To your untrained eyes, it's just dirt. To his, it's dinner. A deer, stepped here at dawn, pressed its hoof just enough to crease the soil. He follows it like you'd follow a glowing GPS arrow. Mainstream history tells us many native peoples relied on intimate plant and animal knowledge for survival. This wasn't optional trivia. It was dinner, medicine, shelter, and sometimes all three in one. Quirky tidbit. Some Algonquin hunters trained themselves to sniff the air and recognize animal musk the way you'd recognize perfume brands. Imagine someone saying, "Oh, yes, that's definitely eau de beaver." Historians still argue whether plant knowledge was primarily passed through formal teaching or casual observation. Some say apprenticeships existed, where children shadowed elders for years. Others insist it was more fluid, with everyone pitching in knowledge. Bits like a community Wikipedia, except with fewer edit wars and way more dirt under the nails. You pause near a cluster of plants. To you, they're weeds. To the woman crouching beside them, they're salad. She plucks lamb's quarters, chews a leaf, offers you one. It tastes like spinach, only sharper. She points to a patch of bright red berries and shakes her head firmly. You don't need translation. Those are a don't even think about it snack. You realize your modern grocery store is basically the forest, just with nicer flooring and less potential poisoning. Further on, you hear a squirrel's chatter, frantic and high pitched. The hunters freeze, exchange glances. Apparently, that noise means danger, a predator nearby. You look around nervously. Then you notice they're calm, even amused. The squirrel is their alarm system, free of charge. You think about your own house alarm, the one that goes off every time you burn toast. This seems better. A boy, no more than 10, tugs your sleeve and points at a tree trunk. Scratches climb upward in parallel lines. He whispers, gestures, that a bear marked this. It's a warning to others, but also a message. This is my spot. Back off. You swallow hard. The boy giggles at your pale face. For him, it's Tuesday. For you, it's, please let me live until lunchtime. The deeper you walk, the thicker the forest breathes around you. Dampness clings to your skin. Every step squelches with life. The hunters pluck wild onions, tuck them into pouches, then scrape resin from pine bark. They explain, with patient gestures, that resin is glue, fire starter, even medicine. You touch it, sticky and sweet smelling, like a natural band-aid. One elder kneels beside a rotting log, flips it over. Dozens of insects scatter. He grabs a fat grub, bites it in half, chews with no hesitation. You gag. He laughs, offers you one. You shake your head vigorously. He shrugs. Quirky tidbit confirmed. In survival, protein isn't just steaks. It's whatever wriggles. He lives. You learn. The trail twists, revealing a grove of birches. Their white bark glows in dappled light, almost like they're painted. You run your hand along one, smooth, cool. He peels a strip, careful not to harm the tree, and shows you how it curls. Birch bark, he explains, is waterproof. Wrap it into a pouch, line a basket, even write messages on it. Imagine your notebook dissolving in the rain, while this tree just shrugs off water like a pro. Suddenly, the hunters stop. They raise hands, signaling silence. You hold your breath, every nerve buzzing. A deer grazes ahead, unaware. You watch the hunters slip into positions so fluid it looks rehearsed. You, meanwhile, stand frozen, wondering if blinking too loud will ruin the hunt. An arrow flies, swift and silent. The deer collapses. You exhale, heart racing. They whisper prayers, thanking the spirit of the animal, then begin their careful work. Mainstream fact: Native Americans often used every part of a hunted animal: meat for food, hide for clothing, bones for tools, sinew for thread, nothing wasted. Fringe tidbit: some groups believed deer taught humans to be patient. So hunting wasn't just taking, it was a kind of mutual exchange. Historians still argue whether this was metaphorical belief or literal doctrine, but either way, it shaped how people approached survival. The smell of fresh kill fills the air, metallic and sharp. You try not to gag, reminding yourself this is food, not horror. They work with practiced hands, wrapping cuts in leaves, tying bundles with strips of sinew. A girl sprinkles crushed sage over the carcass, masking scent from predators. You note the elegance. Survival isn't just necessity, it's ritual, respect, rhythm. You carry on, deer meat packed, the trail now scented with herbs and smoke. Ahead, sunlight filters through to reveal an opening. Camp. Smoke curls lazily from a central fire. Women weave baskets from reeds, their fingers flying like knitters. Children chase each other with pine cone toys, laughter mingling with the crackle of flames. And here, you realize something. The forest isn't scary when it's shared. Alone, you'd be hopeless, probably crying over your broken phone. But in community, the trees feel less like threats and more like companions. Every rustle means information, every bird call a warning, every plant a possibility. As night begins to fall, you lean against a log, eyelids heavy. The forest doesn't sing you to sleep. It whispers like 1,000 leaves rubbing together, and you realize hidden survival skills are only hidden if no one bothers to look. Out here, they're obvious, as bright as the path through endless pines. The forest slowly dims, shadows stretching long like dark fingers. But the real show begins once the fire sparks. You crouch close, feeling the first lick of heat on your cheeks. the kind of warmth that makes your eyes water, not from sadness, but from relief. The hunters squat in a half circle, stacking branches with deliberate order. You notice how each piece is chosen with the same care you'd give to ingredients in a recipe. No soggy logs, no random piles. This is engineering disguised as kindling. The first ember comes from a tiny coal, coaxed from a bow drill spun between calloused palms. Your arms ache just watching. Sparks dance, faint at first, then flare into orange life. You're hypnotized. You lean forward, and someone smirks. You've got ash on your nose. Quirky tidbit. Some tribes taught kids to smear a bit of ash on their faces during early fire lessons, partly as camouflage, partly as a reminder not to rub sweaty eyes mid-spark. You think of it as the prehistoric version of safety goggles, only more fashionable. Mainstream history notes how vital fire was for native survival. It cooked food, hardened weapons, scared predators, and even shaped landscapes. Entire prairies were managed with controlled burns, renewing grass for bison herds. Still, historians argue whether these burns were purely practical or also spiritual rituals. Some say both, that fire was both tool and God, lighter and liturgy in one. The fire grows steady, logs crackling like soft applause. Smoke curls upward, stinging your nostrils. You wave it away, only to have an elder chuckle and fan more toward you. He explains gently that smoke keeps mosquitoes at bay. You stop complaining immediately, remembering the time a single mosquito ruined your camping trip. Here, smoke is perfume, shield, and lullaby. Someone lays strips of meat across wooden racks propped over the coals. The fat drips, sizzling, sending up a scent that makes your stomach roar. You lean closer, but another hand pats your chest back. Patience, stranger. Survival isn't fast food. The heat must be low, the drying slow. They aren't just cooking dinner, they're preserving tomorrow. Jerky, smoky, and tough will last weeks. Suddenly, you understand. This fire is a time machine, carrying food forward to feed you long after flames die. A girl tosses herbs onto the coals. The air fills with sage, sweetgrass, cedar. Your lungs ache, but in a good way, like they're being scrubbed clean. She tells you, with a mischievous grin, that bad dreams don't cross smoke. You laugh nervously, but part of you leans in anyway, just in case. The hunters trade stories as they sit, voices low, rhythm slow. You don't understand every word, but the cadence lulls you. Laughter erupts when one mimics a deer's clumsy fall into a river. Another teases him back, recalling the time he dropped a bow into mud. Humor, you realize, is a survival skill too. Without it, nights get too long, fear too heavy. Someone passes you a stick tipped with a piece of roasting fish. You bite, too eager, burning your tongue. They chuckle. You wave your hand, blowing frantic air, and one boy offers you a sip of warm broth ladled from a clay pot. It tastes earthy, faintly bitter, but soothing. You sigh, steam fogging your face. Quirky fact: some tribes used ashes as seasoning. A pinch in soup thickened it, added minerals, even neutralized toxins in certain plants. You imagine offering ash-seasoned stew to your friends and watching their horrified faces. Meanwhile, here it's gourmet survival cuisine. The fire pops, embers leaping like mischievous fireflies. You lean back, watching the sparks vanish into black sky. Above, stars ignite one by one, faint pinpricks stitched across velvet. The warmth seeps deep, relaxing every muscle. For a moment, you think you could just lie down right here, head on moss, and drift. But then, someone pokes the fire, and flames leap again, reminding you fire sleeps only when fed. Across the circle, an elder tells of a great blaze long ago when lightning struck dry prairie. Instead of disaster, it brought renewal. Grass grew greener, animals returned, life thrived. Fire, he explains, destroys and gives in the same breath. You nod, mesmerized. It's philosophy, but also survival. Manage fire or be managed by it. You notice how they arrange wood, teepee shape for fast heat, log cabin shape for steady burn, flatbed for coals. Each design has purpose, and you can't help but compare it to your messy attempts at backyard barbecues. Out here, fire isn't hobby, it's heartbeat. A boy scoops glowing coals into a hollowed out log, covers it with damp moss. He explains this will keep fire alive overnight, embers smoldering till morning. You realize they don't start fire every day. They carry it like a living creature, tended, fed, protected. Suddenly, you picture fire as a pet, warm, loyal, occasionally bites. Historians still argue whether fire knowledge was guarded as sacred secret or shared freely. Some records suggest only certain families were fire keepers, chosen to tend and transport flames for the tribe. Others imply everyone had at least basic skill. You sit by this circle, and you know one thing: without fire, survival here would be unthinkable. Your eyes droop as the flames dance lower. Heat strokes your face. Cool night presses your back. The dual embrace makes you drowsy, content. Someone strums a simple melody on a wooden flute, high notes rising above the crackle. The tune is repetitive, hypnotic, like the fire itself. Never the same, never ending. You close your eyes, hear the hiss of fat, smell cedar smoke in your hair, feel warmth cradle your body. Fire, you realize, isn't just survival. It's company, it's memory, it's tomorrow's promise. The fire fades behind you as morning damp creeps in, and now it's time to think about the other side of survival. What happens when clouds roll thick and winds turn cruel? You've stepped out of the warm glow into a world where storms matter more than story. The elders glance at the sky, reading shapes in the clouds like you'd read headlines. A shift in the wind, a sudden hush of birds, a smell of iron in the air. These aren't omens, they're forecasts. You tug your cloak tighter, except you don't have one, so the cold bites straight through your skin. Luckily, you're in good company. They're about to show you how to stay dry, warm, and alive without modern insulation, Gore-Tex, or hotel bookings. You watch them peel bark from spruce trees, careful not to cut too deep. The thin sheets bend easily, smelling sharp and resinous. These will form walls, they explain, overlapping like shingles to shed rain. You look up at your house in memory, roof shingles, nailed down neatly. Here, the principle is the same, but with more sap on your fingers. Mainstream history tells us native shelters varied by environment. Wigwams in the northeast, teepees on the plains, pueblos in the southwest. Each design reflected both climate and culture. Wigwams were domed and bark covered, teepees tall and portable, pueblos stacked like sun-baked apartments. Quirky tidbit? Some early explorers described wigwams as turtle shells of wood, baffled at how something so simple could feel warm and dry inside. Historians still argue Whether Europeans underestimated these designs or simply couldn't admit they worked better than drafty thatched cottages, here, in the forest, they bend saplings into arches, lash them with strips of bark. You help, fumbling, the sap making your hands sticky. They laugh kindly, not mocking, and guide your clumsy knots. Soon, a skeleton of curved wood rises, ribs of a giant beast. They drape bark sheets across it, pressing edges into the ground, sealing gaps with moss. You step back, astonished. It looks like something a child would doodle, yet you duck inside and find it dark, quiet, warmer already. Rain begins to patter on the roof, but inside, only muffled drips reach you. A child crouches, spreading dry pine needles across the floor like carpet. They're springy, fragrant, keeping your body off damp earth. You sit, lean back, and suddenly, this hut feels more luxurious than your own living room. There's no Netflix here, but the sound of rain overhead fills the silence in a way streaming never could. When snow threatens, the strategy changes. You're led to a shelter, half buried in drifts, a dome of snow blocks carved like puzzle pieces. At first you scoff. Snow is freezing. How could it be warm? But inside, the air is still, your breath rising in slow clouds. The walls glow faintly blue, filtering light. It's quiet enough to hear your heartbeat. A woman explains how body heat collects, raising the temperature surprisingly high, warm enough that she takes off her outer cloak. You gape, sweating in your modern parka. Mainstream fact: Inuit igloos could reach temperatures up to 60 degrees inside with just a lamp burning. Fringe tidbit: sometimes thin windows were made of clear ice slabs, letting in sunlight without the draft. Historians still argue whether these were common practice or just occasional innovations. But the result is clear. You're toasty in a house of frozen water. Back in the forest, the storm lashes harder, wind whips branches, rain splatters sideways. You huddle with families inside bark shelters, listening to weather rage while you sit dry. Someone smirks at your astonished face. To them, this isn't miracle. It's Tuesday. Outside, men lean long poles against lodges, securing them from collapse. Women spread hides over roofs to stop leaks. Children giggle at each thunderclap, not frightened, but entertained. You think of your own storm prep, frantic trips for batteries and chips. Here, preparation is constant. Every branch, every pelt, every moss clump is part of an ongoing insurance policy. The air inside grows humid, thick with breath and smoke from a small hearth. It clings to your hair, your clothes. A girl waves a bundle of smoldering sage, purifying the air, or maybe just making it smell less like wet dog. You breathe it in, the sharp scent waking your lungs. Quirky tidbit: some shelters included smoke holes that doubled as skylights. Others had weighted flaps you could pull down during blizzards, like a primitive, retractable roof. Historians still argue whether these details were widespread or just clever improvisations in certain regions. You don't care. You're just grateful your toes are warm. As night falls, you curl under a shared hide blanket, pressed shoulder to shoulder with strangers who now feel like family. Their warmth merges with yours, a living insulation. You realize survival isn't always about tools. It's about bodies, pressed close, reminding each other that life continues. The storm rumbles on, rain hammering the bark roof. You close your eyes, and the steady rhythm becomes lullaby. The hiss of water against walls turning violent chaos into background music. Outside, trees sway, branches snap. Inside, you breathe slow, steady, wrapped in ingenuity and bark. Morning after the storm greets you with soft light dripping through leaves, the forest damp but calm again. Your feet ache from the long trudges, and as you stretch, you notice someone crouched nearby, working leather with nimble hands. At first glance, it looks ordinary, just a strip of hide, stretched taut. But soon you realize you're about to learn the quiet magic of moccasins. The hide is supple, scraped free of hair, smelling faintly of smoke and animal fat. They've chewed it soft, yes, literally, with their teeth, and rubbed it with brains to tan it. You grimace, but then you touch the leather. It's smoother than any store-bought boots you own. Mainstream history records that nearly every native culture had its own version of moccasins, customized for the environment. Hard soles for rocky deserts, soft ones for forest trails, even fur-lined for snow. And quirky tidbit? Some moccasins were decorated with porcupine quills, so sharp they doubled as deterrents if someone tried to step too close in battle. Imagine fashion that says, step back or bleed. Historians still argue whether moccasins spread by trade routes or arose independently in each region. Evidence suggests both. Ideas walked as fast as feet carried them. For now, you're watching a pair being stitched before your eyes. The seamstress threads sinew, pulling each loop tight. The sound is soft but satisfying, like zip ties clicking. She beckons you, gesturing for your bare feet. Embarrassed, you wiggle your toes forward, mud-stained and clumsy. She slips the soft shoe on, and it hugs your foot like second skin. No stiff sole, no blisters waiting to happen, just leather molding instantly. You stand, surprised at how quiet you've become. Each step now whispers instead of crunching. You realize the hunters weren't superhuman. They just had better footwear. A boy grins, holding up his own pair, fur trimming the edges. He stomps dramatically, then tiptoes in silence to show the difference. You try it too, failing miserably, tripping on a root. They laugh, but kindly. Survival isn't just tools. It's the practice of clumsily becoming less noticeable. As the day unfolds, you join a hunting walk. Every step is cushioned, muffled. You can feel pebbles underfoot, but without pain. This sensitivity lets you know when the ground softens, when tracks are fresh. You realize moccasins aren't about comfort. They're about connection. They turn your feet into sensors. Modern sneakers deaden everything. These amplify it. Mainstream fact: moccasins weren't just for walking. Some tribes left distinctive patterns in the dirt, intentionally marking identity or clan. Others rubbed charcoal on soles to conceal tracks. Fringe tidbit: there are stories of hunters wearing moccasins backward to trick pursuers into thinking they were walking the opposite direction. You smile at the sheer pettiness of it. Ancient trolling at its finest. Around midday, a woman sprinkles crushed herbs into a pot, drops in moccasin leather scraps. She's making soup stock. Yes, soup from footwear. You gag slightly, but she explains. In hard times, boiled leather softened enough to chew. It wasn't delicious, but it kept people alive. You sip politely when offered, pretending it tastes like gourmet broth. Later, you watch as children decorate their moccasins with bright beads and quills. Tiny hands stab needles through leather, threading patterns of suns animals, spirals. You think of your childhood sneakers, covered in marker doodles. This feels similar, but more permanent. Art that also survives mud, snow, time. The group settles for the night. Moccasins drying by the fire. Smoke seeps into leather, curing it against rot. You watch the flickering shadows on stretched hides, realizing shoes here aren't disposable. They're companions, shaped to each person, mended instead of discarded. Historians still argue whether moccasin artistry was purely decorative or symbolic language. Some beadwork seems random, others encode maps, stories, even prayers. You trace a spiral with your finger and wonder if it's just pretty or if it's whispering a direction only insiders know. By now, your feet feel lighter, your steps softer. You remember blisters from your last hike, the ache of stiff boots. Tonight, you curl your toes inside supple leather, the faint smell of smoke and earth rising from them. For the first time, you feel like you belong, not just walking through the forest, but walking with it. The moccasins have made your steps quieter, but soon you realize that silence here isn't only about feet. You march deeper into the woods with the hunters, and suddenly their voices fade, not because they're tired, but because talking aloud would shatter the world around them. Instead, they start speaking in a way that leaves you blinking. One man raises his hand, fingers bent slightly, and another nods. No words, no noise, just gestures flowing like water. You tilt your head, confused. The boy beside you grins, then taps two fingers against his lips, pointing forward. You think, are we talking about snacks? He rolls his eyes and mimes a rabbit hopping. You laugh too loud, and a stern look silences you. This is survival communication, not charades. Mainstream history records that many Native American groups used complex sign languages, especially across the plains, where dozens of languages collided. They needed ways to trade, warn, and plan without words. Quirky tidbit? Some explorers noted that traders could speak for hours using nothing but gestures, swapping horses and goods, even telling jokes. You try mimicking one signal and end up flashing what looks like, my goat needs Wi Fi. Not quite right. Historians still argue whether these sign systems were shared universally across tribes or just improvised locally. Some say Plains Sign Language was as sophisticated as spoken tongues. Others insist it was situational shorthand. Standing here, you realize one truth: it works better than whispering when danger prowls nearby. The hunters crouch low, waving hands in fluid motions. A finger drawn across the throat means quiet. A fist tapped twice means bison ahead. You nod solemnly, though you still wonder how to say, please tell me where the bathroom is. Later that evening, you sit by the fire and watch smoke spiral into dusk. Suddenly, puffs rise. Short, long, short. Your brain lights up. Morse code? Wrong century. Here it's smoke signaling. Bundles of damp moss, tossed on flames, create thick, white columns. The smoke climbs high, visible for miles, carrying messages across valleys. You imagine one camp telling another, dinner's ready, or more urgently, danger. Mainstream fact: smoke signals varied by region. Some tribes used 3 puffs to mean all is well, 2 for danger, or 1 long column for summoning. Fringe tidbit: there are stories of hunters deliberately faking signals to mislead enemies. Ancient trolling once again. Historians still argue how standardized these codes really were. Some believe every group had its own dialect of smoke. You lean back, staring at the column fading into twilight. The idea hits you. This is the world's first text message, except with firewood instead of emojis. You imagine explaining to a modern teenager, "Sorry, can't reply. My moss is wet." The next day, you stumble upon carved markings on a tree, spirals, notches, crude animal shapes. They aren't graffiti, they're messages. One elder taps the spiral, pointing west. It means water nearby. A crosshatch warns of bear tracks. These aren't random doodles, they're survival breadcrumbs left for those who follow. A child scratches lines in dirt, then pats your arm to copy. You try, drawing wavy marks. He laughs, shakes his head, wipes them away. Apparently, you just wrote squirrel fart instead of river bend. So much for being fluent. The beauty, you realize, is that survival here doesn't rely on noise. In silence, meaning thrives. A raised eyebrow, a puff of smoke, a carved spiral. All tell stories without shattering the stillness that animals, enemies, and storms might notice. As you drift toward sleep that night, you replay the gestures in your head, a hand slicing air, danger, a circle drawn in palm, fire, a finger pointing skyward, hawk above. They blur together until you're dreaming in signs, your hands twitching unconsciously. In this quiet world, even your sleep is fluent. The silence of hand signs lingers in your head as morning arrives. But today's lesson is less about quiet communication and more about quiet patience. You crouch low in the underbrush with two hunters, the air damp and still, and you realize you're about to learn the art of trapping the unseen. Your breath fogs in the cool air. Every twig beneath you feels too loud, every blink too long. They motion for you to stay still, though your legs already twitch with pins and needles. Welcome to the slowest, sneakiest game in town. One man produces a length of cord made from twisted sinew. He shapes it into a loop, sets it delicately on a narrow trail where rabbits pass. The loop is almost invisible against the dirt, anchored with a bent branch that will snap upward once triggered. You lean closer, impressed by the simplicity. Mainstream history explains snares like this were crucial across many regions. Small, cheap, reliable traps that could feed families when larger hunts failed. Quirky tidbit? Some hunters even used human hair to make snares. You imagine plucking strands from your own head, and suddenly your thinning hairline feels very expendable. Historians still argue whether these traps were mostly used for everyday meals or reserved for emergencies. Some records suggest snares were a quiet, constant source of meat, especially in winter. Others argue they were backup plans, less glamorous than the grand hunts, but no less important. You shift uncomfortably, realizing you'd probably starve, waiting for a snare to spring just once. The hunters move on, showing you deadfalls, simple log traps propped with sticks. Bait lures animals underneath, and gravity does the rest. You try balancing the sticks, and your contraption collapses instantly. They chuckle, rebuilding it with fluid hands. For them, it's Lego. For you, it's Jenga, with stakes attached. Further into the woods, they reveal decoys, bundles of grass shaped into rough birds, feathers stuck at odd angles. To you, it looks like a preschool art project. To the turkeys pecking nearby, it looks like dinner companions. A bowstring twangs and one bird drops. You wince at the suddenness, but survival rarely asks for politeness. The smell of blood rises, sharp and metallic. They bow their heads briefly in thanks before tucking the turkey into a woven carrier. You remember the earlier deer hunt and realize the theme. Nothing here is wasted, not even feathers. These will become fletching for arrows, soft lining for blankets, maybe even toys for children. Mainstream fact: decoys were used not only for hunting, but also for fishing. Some tribes floated carved wooden ducks on lakes, tricking real ducks into landing close enough for nets. Fringe tidbit: there are stories of people disguising themselves with full bird skins, waddling into flocks like feathered spies. Historians still debate whether these were widespread practices or just particularly bold experiments, but you can't help imagining yourself waddling into a goose gaggle, hoping no one notices your sneakers sticking out. As dusk settles, you watch a line of traps set along a game trail. The hunters check older ones, finding a rabbit dangling, limp but intact. They free it, whispering words of gratitude, then reset the snare with practiced ease. Your stomach turns slightly at the sight, but then the smell of roasting rabbit by fire eases your queasiness. Hunger changes your ethics quickly. They invite you to taste. The meat is lean, earthy, faintly gamey. You chew slowly, pretending you're on a food show. Notes of pine, with a hint of, please don't tell PETA. They laugh, and someone sprinkles dried berries over the meat, sweetening the flavor. Suddenly, it feels less like survival and more like cuisine. As night deepens, you lie awake in your shelter, the sounds of forest predators circling faintly outside. You think about the traps still waiting out there, silent, patient, holding their breath in wood and string. You realize survival isn't always about strength or speed. Sometimes it's about patience, invisibility, and letting the world step into your design. You drift off imagining your dreams caught like animals in a snare, tangled until morning releases them. The traps of yesterday still hang in your thoughts as the sun rises. But today, your teachers tug you toward another lesson, not about teeth or claws, but about roots and leaves. You walk into a patch of meadow that at first looks like weeds on parade, tall stalks swaying, broad leaves wilting with dew. To you, it's an allergy nightmare. To them, it's a pharmacy. A woman kneels, digs carefully with a sharpened stick, and pulls up a root as thick as your wrist. She holds it to your nose, sharp, bitter, pungent. She grins as you recoil. This is medicine, she gestures. You sip later, and it tastes like punishment. Still, your stomach settles from last night's overindulgence in rabbit, and suddenly the bitterness feels like grace. Mainstream history tells us Native Americans across the continent developed extensive plant-based knowledge, catalogs of cures passed orally for generations, willow bark for pain relief, goldenrod for wounds, echinacea for colds. Quirky tidbit: some tribes even used tobacco smoke, not only ceremonially, but also literally blown into ears to treat earaches. You picture a friend puffing into your head and think, hard pass, but thanks anyway. Historians still argue whether this knowledge was gathered through centuries of trial and error, or whether it stemmed from ritual visions guiding choices. Was it science, spirituality, or some fusion neither side today fully grasps? You sip another bitter tea and wonder if it matters. Your headache has vanished either way. Children scamper around, gathering yarrow leaves, chewing them into pulp, then slapping them onto a boy's scraped knee. He yelps, then quiets as the bleeding slows. You realize you've just witnessed the prehistoric version of Band-Aids, messier, but undeniably effective. Another elder hands you a pouch of dried cedar shavings, instructs you to toss a pinch into the fire. The smoke swirls fragrant, nose clearing, and they explain it's both purifier and ward against illness. You breathe deeply, coughing, tears streaming, but when your sinuses clear, you almost forgive the stinging. You pass under a tree where fungus mushrooms cling. A woman taps one with her knife, explaining how it can smolder for hours. Carried as fire starter and antiseptic, she presses it into your palm. It feels dry, papery, like nature's matchbook. You tuck it carefully into your pouch, feeling oddly equipped. Mainstream fact: many healers, often called medicine men or women, balanced practical botany with ritual. Plants were chosen not only for chemistry, but for symbolism. Fringe tidbit: some treatments included mixing herbs with song or dance, amplifying healing with rhythm. Historians still debate whether this added placebo, spiritual reinforcement, or both. Watching now, you sense the power of being cared for, not just physically, but communally. You watch a woman pound roots in a stone mortar, rhythmic thuds echoing through camp. The paste is spread on a man's swollen ankle. He sighs, relief washing across his face. The smell is earthy, sharp, medicinal. You lean closer, realizing survival here isn't just about not dying, it's about easing the little pains that make life unbearable. Later, as the group rests, someone hands you a sprig of mint. You chew, and coolness floods your mouth, masking the endless taste of smoke and game. You grin, grateful. Quirky detail: mint wasn't just breath freshener, it soothed stomachs, flavored stews, and warded off bugs. Multi-purpose, like duct tape, but tastier. As twilight falls, you sit by firelight while an elder tells of visions where plants spoke in dreams. He recalls ancestors who claimed cedar whispered its uses, or willow offered its bark freely. You glance at the flames, shadows dancing, and wonder if your own dreams tonight will feature chattering herbs giving you unsolicited advice. By now, your pockets bulge with leaves, roots, bark, a walking apothecary. You're no healer, but you feel the edge of knowledge pressing in. Survival isn't just the body enduring, it's the body cared for, soothed, mended, made whole by green wisdom. You curl into your bedding, mint on your tongue, smoke in your hair, roots in your pouch, and drift off, imagining the meadows whisper, "You'll survive, stranger, as long as you listen." The meadow of medicines fades behind you, and now the sound shifts from whispering leaves to the slap of water against wood. You stand at the edge of a wide river, its surface broken by sunlight and ripples. Someone tugs your sleeve and points, not at the water itself, but at the sleek vessel bobbing there. A canoe carved from cedar, slender and shining with sap. It looks impossibly fragile, yet they motion for you to climb in. You hesitate, wobbling, imagining yourself tipping instantly into icy depths. They laugh, steady the boat, and suddenly you're gliding. The canoe slices water with barely a sound. Each paddle stroke dips smooth, propels long. You watch the shoreline slip by, trees mirrored upside down in the current. The rhythm hypnotizes you. Dip, pull, lift, drip, dip, pull, lift, drip. You almost forget your fear of capsizing. Mainstream history reminds you that native peoples across North America built canoes tailored to their environments. Birch bark for lakes and rivers, cedar dugouts for coastal waters, sealskin umiaks in the Arctic. Each was a marvel of engineering, light enough to carry over land, strong enough to haul game, trade goods, even families. Quirky tidbit: some birch bark canoes were so light a single person could hoist one on their shoulders and trot off like it was a folded lawn chair. You try imagining that with your kayak back home and immediately pull a muscle in your imagination. Historians still argue whether canoe design spread across tribes through shared knowledge or if each style arose independently. The evidence suggests a little of both, ideas carried as easily as the boats themselves. Sitting here, though, you stop caring about debates. You're too busy balancing. The man in front leans forward, pointing with his paddle at a swirl on the water. Fish, his gesture says. Another motion points at a logjam that could flip you. You mimic him clumsily, your paddle smacking the gunnel. They chuckle, but keep you steady. You're learning that a canoe is less boat, more dance partner, responsive, graceful, but only if you follow its lead. The group lands briefly on a gravel bar. They flip the canoe, showing its construction. Bark stitched with spruce root, seams sealed with pine pitch. You touch the sticky resin, still faintly aromatic, and realize this is waterproofing courtesy of the forest itself. No hardware store needed. They launch again, this time against a current. Your arms burn, shoulders ache, but their strokes remain smooth, unhurried. They know how to read eddies, sliding into slow water while you flail in the fast. You puff like you've just sprinted a mile, while they grin, barely sweating. Mainstream fact: canoes weren't just transport, they were lifelines for trade. Copper, obsidian, shells, corn, stories, all moved by paddle. Fringe tidbit: some oral traditions claim canoes were gifts from spirit animals taught to humans through visions. Historians still debate whether these stories symbolize engineering genius or spiritual truth. Either way, the boats float, and that's enough. You pause midstream, watching reflections shimmer. The silence out here feels different, deeper, emptier, yet full of rhythm. The slap of water, the drip off paddles, the occasional call of a loon. The world narrows to balance and breath. A sudden squall rolls in, wind chopping waves. Your heart leaps, panic clawing, but the lead paddler simply shifts, angling into waves. The canoe rises, falls, glides on. Your stomach flips, but the boat never falters. They've done this before. You cling tighter, and a boy laughs at your white-knuckled grip. Relax, his grin says. The water knows us. The storm passes as quickly as it came. Sunlight returns, sparkling. You exhale, finally loosening your grip. They steer toward shore, sliding up onto sand with a gentle crunch. You stumble out, legs trembling, soaked in sweat, but dry from water. Around the fire that evening, they carve paddles from cedar planks, edges smoothed by stone. Each one feels personal, shaped for hands, balanced for rhythm. You're handed a half-finished paddle, told to sand it. You rub until blisters form, then marvel at its sleekness. Tomorrow, it will taste water. As night deepens, you lie back, listening to distant river sounds. The canoe rests nearby, upside down, a dark curve against starlight. You realize it isn't just a boat. It's survival, shaped into elegance, carrying life across restless waters. You drift off, imagining yourself paddling endlessly, lulled by dip, pull, lift, drip, until sleep swallows the shore. The river fades into memory, replaced by an open sky, dark and immense. You find yourself lying flat on your back in a clearing, eyes tilted upward until your neck aches. Above you, stars bloom in thousands, scattered like spilled salt across black velvet. No phone towers, no street lamps, just unbroken dark, pierced with light. You're told to keep still, to watch, to listen, not with your ears, but with your eyes. Tonight, the lesson is time itself, counted not in clocks, but in constellations. An elder kneels beside you, pointing with a crooked finger. His nail traces lines between stars, and suddenly you see animals you never noticed. A bear lumbers across the sky. A coyote yips in frozen sparks. A great river arcs in light. He whispers their names, syllables like low drum beats, carrying both story and instruction. Mainstream history tells us Native Americans across the continent used stars for navigation, calendars, and ceremony. From the Lakota's sacred circle of constellations to the Navajo's sky coyote, stories weren't just entertainment, they were maps. Quirky tidbit. Some tribes used the rising of the Pleiades cluster to mark when to plant corn. You think about checking a gardening app for frost dates and feel hilariously underqualified. Historians still argue whether these star systems were purely practical or deeply spiritual calendars of destiny. Was Orion a hunter, a reminder to chase bison, or a guardian watching from above? Perhaps all at once. You watch the stars flicker and realize ambiguity itself was survival. It left room for both science and spirit. A woman spreads sand near the fire, pokes holes in patterns to mimic the sky overhead. Children gather, tracing them with small fingers. She explains how each season has its own stellar guide. Winter nights call on the Great Bear, summer relies on the morning star. The kids repeat the names like nursery rhymes, embedding calendars into memory long before paper. Your eyelids droop, but she nudges you awake, insisting you see the Milky Way stretch overhead. They call it a spirit road, a pathway for souls. You trace its cloudy band, feeling suddenly small and endless all at once. The fire behind you crackles, but the real warmth seems to spill from the stars themselves. Mainstream fact: Polaris, the North Star, anchored travelers just as in Europe, but here it was, woven into origin stories and ceremonies. Fringe tidbit. Some accounts say meteors were interpreted as messages, either warnings or blessings. Historians still debate the consistency of these beliefs across tribes, but the awe remains timeless. You, watching a streak of light blaze briefly across sky, feel a chill. Was that just rock and fire? Or someone waving goodnight? An elder hands you a bundle of sticks. He lays them carefully on the ground, each pointing toward a star. He explains this is how they remembered alignments, simple tools to recall complex skies. You try to copy, fumbling, your lines skewed. The children giggle. You laugh too. Even in ancient astronomy, you're the class clown. Hours pass, though you lose sense of them without clocks. Stars shift slowly, and they point out how the horizon swallows one and gifts another. Time here is not seconds ticking, it's light moving. You breathe slower, chest rising to match the rhythm of night. Later, someone sings a low chant, words rolling like waves. The melody weaves with stars, making you feel as though the sky itself hums. You close your eyes, then open them again, terrified you'll miss something. Above you, the constellations seem to lean closer, like teachers peering over your shoulder. Historians still argue whether these star stories were designed purely for memory aids or carried mystical authority. You realize the truth might be both. The stars aren't just for planting and hunting, they're comfort in darkness, reassurance that patterns persist. As sleep finally tugs your eyelids, you imagine drifting upward, joining the constellations, walking along the Milky Way with ancestors who whispered to the same stars centuries ago. Your breath slows, and the night sky hums lullabies only silence can sing. The stars still shimmer in your memory when the morning hunt begins. You wake to the smell of damp earth and pine smoke, and before your eyes fully adjust, a bow is placed in your hands. Smooth wood, curved with care, sinew strung tight enough to sing when plucked. You're told not to play it like a guitar, though temptation hums in your fingers. Today, silence is law. The hunters walk ahead, moccasins whispering on soil. You follow, bow clumsy across your chest. The forest feels different now, tense, alert. Every rustle makes you freeze. Every shadow stretches longer. You're taught to step where others step, heel to toe, pausing as if the ground itself might rat you out. Mainstream history tells us the bow and arrow arrived in North America thousands of years ago, revolutionizing survival. Faster than spears, lighter than atlatls, they allowed hunters to strike from distance. Quirky tidbit. Some arrows were fletched not with feathers, but with twisted grass, which made them wobble intentionally, useful for hunting birds in flight. You picture your arrows spiraling like drunk darts and try not to giggle. Historians still argue whether bow technology spread rapidly through contact or developed gradually across regions. Either way, by the time Europeans arrived, bows were already masterpieces, sinew-backed for power, recurved for accuracy, each designed with artistry equal to their lethality. A hunter crouches, nocks an arrow, pulls slowly. You watch the muscles along his back tense, the string groan quietly. The deer ahead lifts its head, ears twitching. Silence stretches thin. The arrow flies, swift, whispering, final. The deer collapses. The forest exhales. You realize you'd been holding your breath the whole time. The hunters approach reverently, touching the animal, murmuring words you don't understand but feel. Thanks given, spirit honored, body respected. The arrow is retrieved, cleaned, nothing wasted, not even the silence surrounding it. Your urge to try. Your hands tremble, sweat slicking your palms. You pull the string, release too early. The arrow skitters harmlessly into brush. Children laugh softly, but not cruelly. One boy retrieves it, pats your arm. Everyone starts somewhere. Mainstream fact. Arrows varied in design. Broadheads for large game, blunt tips for birds, barbed ones for fish. Fringe tidbit. Some hunters dipped tips in plant toxins for extra punch, though historians still debate how common or effective this was. Watching your sad arrow flop, you think maybe you could use some of that poison. They show you again. Breathe, anchor, release. You mimic, awkward but determined. This time, your arrow sinks into a log. Not game, not glory, but progress. A cheer rises, half in jest, half in encouragement. You grin despite the ache in your arms. Later, around firelight, the bows rest nearby, strung but silent. The hunters tell stories of arrows flying so true they pierced two animals at once. You raise a skeptical eyebrow, and they shrug. Maybe myth, maybe memory. Historians still argue how much of oral tradition was fact, how much was fable. But tonight, the line between truth and tale blurs, softened by smoke and laughter. A girl picks up a bow half her size, draws with effortless grace, looses an arrow that thunks into target wood. Pride shines in her eyes. You realize this isn't just hunting, it's heritage, passed down like language. The bow is survival, but also story. As night deepens, you run a finger along the bow's smooth wood, the sinew tight as heartbeat. You imagine every arrow as a silent syllable, written in air, read in meat and bone. You close your eyes, hearing the string hum, the arrow whisper, the forest answer. Sleep comes like a drawn bowstring, released, swift and deep. The morning doesn't start with hunting this time. It starts with voices, not loud, but layered, overlapping like the chatter of a busy market. You walk into a clearing where hides are spread, baskets stacked, shells gleam in the sun, and the smell of smoked fish drifts from a nearby fire. This isn't camp, it's commerce. Here, survival secrets are swapped not just for family, but for community. You see women trading maize in woven bags, their kernels golden and heavy. In return, another group offers obsidian blades that catch the light like black mirrors. A boy holds up a string of wampum, beads polished from shells, purple and white, glistening. He twirls it proudly, then passes it to a stranger in exchange for dried venison. You realize you're watching one of the first economies you've ever set foot in, one where currency is edible, wearable, and spiritual all at once. Mainstream history tells us native trade networks spanned continents. Shells from the Atlantic found their way to the Great Plains. Copper from the Great Lakes turned up in the Southwest. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists once uncovered macaw feathers in ancient New Mexico, birds native to Central America. That's thousands of miles of trading just for a splash of color. You glance at your own online shopping habits and laugh. People have always wanted exotic flair, even if it took years instead of 2-day shipping. Historians still argue whether these trades were purely practical exchanges of goods or also deep symbolic rituals. Wampum, for example, wasn't just jewelry, it carried meaning, sometimes treaties, sometimes promises. You finger the beads handed to you by a trader, wondering if you're holding food receipt, love letter, or peace contract. The air hums with negotiation. No shouting, no haggling battles, just steady conversation, handshakes, nods. Each item has weight, not just in value, but in trust. You watch a man hand over a carved pipe inlaid with red stone, and in return, he's given bags of salt. He lifts the pipe high before tucking it away, as though the exchange is part of a ceremony. Nearby, women spread herbs on mats: sage, sweetgrass, cedar, all bundled neatly. Others bring fish wrapped in leaves, smelling briny and sharp. Children scamper with baskets of berries, giggling when a few spill. You realize the market isn't only survival, it's festival, social glue, chance to swap not just goods, but gossip. Mainstream fact: many tribes organized seasonal gatherings timed with harvests, where hundreds would meet to trade, Feast, marry, and celebrate. Fringe tidbit. Some of these gatherings included games, from stickball to foot races, where wagers of food or goods raised stakes. Historians still debate whether the games were mostly entertainment or training for war. But watching the competitive glint in a boy's eye as he tosses a stick, you guess both. Someone presses a roasted ear of corn into your hand, kernels steaming. You bite, juice sweet, smoky from fire. You grin, cheeks puffed, while the trader laughs at your enthusiasm. Food isn't just trade, it's gift, introduction, welcome. As the sun arcs higher, drums begin. A steady beat, low and grounding, underscores chatter. Women hum while weaving new baskets. Men show off arrowheads, demonstrating sharpness by shaving curls of wood. Children dart in and out, carrying messages, laughing. The air feels alive, buzzing with human connection. Historians still argue whether markets like these were dominated by barter or by more formal systems of credit and obligation. Some evidence points to complex IOUs, promises repaid at later gatherings. Others believe trust itself was the only currency needed. You look around at the calm, unhurried faces and realize maybe survival depended as much on generosity as on precision. As twilight falls, torches are lit, markets shift into feasts, goods packed, songs rise, fire crackles. You chew on venison jerky, sip herbal broth, sway to rhythm that feels like heartbeat under open sky. When you lie down that night, belly full, beads still clutched in hand, you understand survival isn't solitary. It's trade, laughter, gifts, trust. It's a web spun wider than any single camp. And if your dream tonight includes macaw feathers in desserts, obsidian gleaming in cornfields, you know it's because these people carried survival on their shoulders, one trade at a time. The trade fires die down, laughter fading into memory, and dawn brings you back into the forest again. But today's teachers don't point at plants or stars. Instead, they point at the living creatures around you, the ones with fur, wings, claws, and scales. You tilt your head, confused, until it dawns on you. The animals are not just food or threats, they are tutors. You crouch near the riverbank, watching a beaver gnaw through a sapling, its teeth scrape in steady rhythm, wood giving way with tiny squeals. An elder nudges you, whispering that beavers teach patience in building. Dams slow rivers, create ponds, shape entire landscapes. You laugh softly, imagining a beaver as a furry civil engineer. Quirky tidbit: some tribes nicknamed them the little people who work while we sleep. You think of your own work habits and feel a little roasted. Mainstream history confirms that native peoples observed animal behavior not just for hunting, but for survival strategies. Wolves taught teamwork, birds predicted weather, bears knew which roots and berries to eat without poisoning themselves. Fringe tidbit: some oral traditions claim humans learned fishing techniques by imitating otters sliding through currents. Historians still argue whether these were literal lessons or symbolic metaphors. But watching an otter dive and reappear with a wriggling fish, you start to suspect it was both. You follow tracks into the woods, where a hunter kneels beside claw marks. He explains wolves leave them to mark territory, but also to signal paths. By shadowing wolves, people found safe passages through snow, routes cleared by stronger bodies. You imagine following a wolf pack, hungry and cold, and suddenly it feels less like predator, versus prey, and more like reluctant coworkers on a hike. High above, an eagle circles. Its wings carve wide arcs against the sky, effortless. A boy squints, then points. Storm tomorrow. You blink. How could he know? But the eagle's flight dips lower, wings stiff in rising winds. Birds, you realize, are barometers with feathers. Mainstream fact: eagle feathers held deep spiritual and cultural importance, often used in ceremonies and worn by leaders. Fringe tidbit: some accounts say people studied eagles not just for symbolism, but to mimic hunting posture. Eyes sharp, silence steady, strike sudden. Historians still debate the extent of practical imitation, but the lesson feels clear when a hawk swoops nearby and seizes a mouse you hadn't even noticed. Back at camp, children chase squirrels, laughing, but one elder points out how squirrels bury nuts in countless places, ensuring survival even if they forget some. Humans, too, learned storage from them, burying caches of corn, meat, seeds. You picture a winter pantry that owes its existence to scatterbrained rodents. Suddenly, squirrels feel like unsung professors of survival. Night falls, and coyotes yip in the distance. The sound sends a shiver down your spine, but your hosts smile, listening as if it's gossip. They explain coyotes are tricksters, teachers in disguise, sometimes foolish, sometimes clever, always reminding people not to underestimate wit. You chuckle, thinking of coyotes as comedians of the ecosystem, cracking jokes you don't quite understand. Historians still argue whether animal teachings were taken literally as direct models or metaphorically as moral tales. Either way, you sense the truth. The line between observation and story is thin. When you live this close to wilderness, every movement, every cry, every scratch and bark becomes lecture notes. As you curl beneath firs, you hear owls hooting steadily. Someone whispers that owls guide the lost at night, their calls echoing like maps through darkness. You listen, heart slowing, body sinking. The animals around you, wolves, eagles, squirrels, owls, become professors in a silent university, teaching survival in lessons no textbook could hold. You drift off with the image of a beaver in tiny spectacles, lecturing you about patience, while an owl grades your homework in the dark. Survival never felt so academic. The owl's lesson fades into dawn, and as sunlight filters through trees, you hear the low thump of a drum. Not for war, not for alarm. This beat pulls people together like a heartbeat echoing through the village. You shuffle closer, moccasins whispering, and see men and women gathering around a fire. Painted faces gleam, feathers sway, and the smoke from sage drifts upward, curling into the blue. Today's survival isn't about bowstrings or snares. It's about spirit, ceremonies that bind strength when muscles falter and remind people why enduring matters at all. You sit cross-legged, hesitant, as a circle begins to form. A singer starts, voice low and steady, then rises like wind-lifting hawks. Another voice joins, then another, until the air trembles with sound. You feel the vibration deep in your ribs, stronger than any caffeine rush. A dancer steps into the circle, feet stamping dust in deliberate rhythm. Every stomp raises a puff, as if the earth itself breathes with the beat. Mainstream history explains that ceremonies served countless purposes: harvest blessings, healing, preparation for hunts, renewal of strength in harsh seasons. They weren't extras, they were core survival tools, psychological armor against hunger and fear. Quirky tidbit? Some accounts describe dancers fasting before ceremonies, believing emptiness of stomach sharpened clarity of spirit. You groan inside. Your own stomach grumbles after missing one meal. Their resolve makes your willpower look like soggy bread. Historians still argue whether each song carried fixed meaning or whether improvisation allowed words to adapt with the moment. Some traditions recorded songs as property of specific families. Others treated them as gifts from dreams, shared freely. You, sitting here, just know that the drumbeat makes your eyelids flutter like a lullaby laced with thunder. A healer tosses cedar into flames, smoke carrying resinous perfume. He waves it over each person, brushing them with an eagle feather. The motion feels both cleansing and grounding, like brushing away dust and worry at once. You bow your head, inhaling deeply, even as your eyes sting. Children cluster on the edge, clapping to the rhythm, their laughter weaving with chant. One girl imitates the dancers, spinning clumsily, and everyone laughs gently, encouraging her. The circle widens to include her steps. You sense the truth. Ceremonies are not exclusion, they are nets, pulling everyone together, from toddlers to elders. Mainstream fact: many tribes linked ceremonies directly to survival cycles. Sun dances renewed strength before hunts. Green corn ceremonies marked safe harvests. Even winter storytelling nights were survival tools, keeping knowledge alive when snow pressed heavy. Fringe tidbit: some elders insisted stories told out of season could invite bad luck. Historians still debate whether this taboo was strict rule or gentle reminder. You, half dozing by the fire, silently promise not to tell winter stories in July just in case. As evening darkens, the circle grows hotter with energy. Dancers sweat, feathers gleam with dew, voices crack, yet push on. You watch as exhaustion becomes power, each step louder, each chant deeper. Hunger, cold, fear, all pushed outward, stomped into dust. Survival here isn't just physical, it's collective hypnosis, convincing bodies they can endure another season. At the ceremony's peak, silence falls. Only the crackle of fire remains. An elder raises hands, speaking slowly, words rolling like river stones. Even without translation, you feel the weight: gratitude for food, prayer for safety, memory of ancestors. You bow your head, heart thudding. For a moment, you imagine your own voice joining, stitched into their rhythm. Later, when the circle disperses, the night feels lighter, easier. Fear of storms, hunger of winter, ache of bones, all softened by chant and flame. You curl beneath your blanket, drumbeat still echoing faintly in your chest. Historians may debate meanings, but lying there, you know the simple truth. Ceremony is survival for the spirit. Without it, the body falters. With it, even hunger waits quietly at the edge of firelight. Dusk settles once again, painting the horizon in amber and violet. The long trail of lessons winds to its end, and you find yourself reclining near the fire, moccasins stretched toward glowing coals, the murmur of voices fading into the soft chorus of crickets. The air feels heavy but kind, carrying the smell of cedar smoke, the faint sweetness of dried berries, and the warmth of the bodies pressed nearby. Tonight is not about hunting or gathering, not about building or trading. It's about letting centuries of hidden skills wash over you one last time. Steady and slow, you gaze at the people around you, hunters sharpening arrowheads with lazy strokes, children curling under fur blankets, women weaving quiet patterns into baskets that will last far longer than the moment. Each task is small, almost invisible, but each one hums with survival. The flicker of firelight paints faces in gold, eyes half closed with contentment. You realize how every skill you've seen, traps, canoes, medicines, signs, stars, threads together into something larger, a rhythm of existence that has pulsed here for countless generations. Mainstream history tells us native peoples thrived for millennia through this layering of knowledge. It wasn't one secret, but thousands. How to catch rabbits, how to carry fire, how to read the sky. Quirky tidbit? Some elders claimed even dreams were teachers, passing down instructions for hunts, shelters, songs. You smile, thinking how your own dreams usually involve missed buses or forgotten pants. Not nearly as useful. Historians still argue whether dreams were metaphor or method, but here, wrapped in the hush of twilight, you feel their weight as truth. You stretch out, feeling the day's fatigue melt. Above, stars return, constellations you now recognize, the bear lumbering, the coyote laughing, the river of souls flowing across the sky. For a moment, you feel less like an outsider and more like part of the pattern. The fire sighs lower, its glow softening. Children drift to sleep first, their tiny breaths syncing with the crackle of embers. Elders speak in hushed tones, words slow, savoring memory like last sips of broth. You let their cadence roll over you, not needing to understand. Rhythm itself is enough. And now, as your own eyelids grow heavier, the forest folds in around you, its chorus of frogs, rustling leaves, distant wolf calls blending into a single lullaby. You sink into it, every lesson learned, every detail carried like stones in your pocket. Survival here was never about grand gestures. It was patience, silence, gratitude, shared warmth. The hidden skills of Native Americans have wrapped themselves around you, steadying your breath, loosening your grip, teaching you that to endure is to listen, to notice, to belong. You roll onto your side, head against soft furs, firelight flickering behind closed eyes. The world hums low, steady, endless. Sleep leans close, gentle and certain. The fire has dwindled now to a scatter of embers, red and pulsing like the last heartbeat of the day. Around you, the forest has softened into a hush, its sharp edges rounded by the slow tide of night. Every sound that once kept you alert, the crack of branches, the whisper of leaves, has settled into a background murmur, steady, predictable, almost like the gentle hum of a fan by your bedside. You breathe deeper, slower, the cool air filling your chest, the warmth of your blanket pressing close. The images of the day drift in and out, canoes sliding across rivers, moccasins whispering over pine needles, smoke signals curling toward the clouds. They blur together now, not as lessons to be memorized, but as soft fragments of story, weaving themselves into dream. Let your shoulders ease, sinking into the ground beneath you. Feel how the earth holds you without effort, how gravity itself is a kind of lullaby, steady and unwavering. The drum beats from earlier still echo faintly in your chest, slower now, like your own heartbeat, calming, grounding, reassuring. The stars above blur as your eyelids lower, but you know they remain, constant in their patterns, watching over you just as they watched over those who lived by them long before. Each flicker is a reminder that you are small, yes, but you are also part of something vast and enduring, a thread in the great weave of survival and story. So let the night take you gently. Let the warmth of the fire fade into the warmth of sleep. There is nothing more to learn, nothing more to do, only the slow drift into rest, the safe cocoon of silence, and the steady rhythm of a world that has always known how to carry you through the dark.